This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my guest and I today on your terms is Rosanna Iacono. Rosanna, thank you for joining me.
It's a
I'm getting
pleasure.
all
Thank you so much.
I practiced that name and I got it out the first time, and so I'm sure I'm going to have to circle back and apologize later. But tell
No,
our
no,
listeners a little bit.
no, you did a good job.
You're very gracious. So please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm the managing partner of a boutique consultancy called The Growth Activists. We have three business partners, and we have a strap line which is helping the courageous build good businesses faster. So what do we mean by that? It's all about the whole notion of good businesses is really about businesses that sort of tap into this new consciousness, into conscious capitalism or into stakeholder capitalism, and are still making money, but are also doing good for society by understanding that there's a bigger group of stakeholders. So that's kind of what our main, the purpose of the business is all about. It's really about really empowering businesses and individuals to do well and do good at the same time and really fulfill their potential that way. But it's definitely still very much about creating commercial success for our clients. And so I've been doing that for almost 2 years now with my business partners. And our main services are really consulting, marketing, and learning and development. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. But if you want me to delve into my past career.
Absolutely. That was my next question, but you beat me to it.
Okay, great. So I've come from a corporate background. Right after university, I, like many Australians, thought I would go overseas and see if I could work in Europe for a year or two before coming home with some experience. And I was really fortunate. The first job, I went to Italy because I grew up bilingual and spoke the language. And I had this dream of working for Armani or, one of the amazing Italian fashion brands. That's what I wanted to do. And instead I landed this job with Nike.
Another famous Italian company.
Exactly. Yeah, little did I know I was going to be with American multinationals for the next 16 years.
Exactly right.
But with Nike, it turned into this amazing 10-year career. So I started in Italy, and then I went across to the European headquarters in Amsterdam. And then I had a couple of global assignments that meant I was spending a lot of time in Portland, Oregon as well, at the global headquarters. So I had this fabulous 10-year career, mostly in apparel, but a lot of it was about I started off really sort of building a market like the Italian market and really driving apparel into that. And, little successes like taking the business from $5 million turnover to $100 million turnover in,
wow.
in years. It was amazing, but it was also pioneering days. We're talking about the early 90s when Nike was just really starting to push hard into markets like Europe. But a lot of the second half of my career at Nike was very much creating and launching new categories. So that's kind of been a bit of a hallmark of my career and my a capability that I've developed, which is how do you tap into macro trends and understand how consumers are evolving and create new categories that tap into their emerging needs and desires. So a couple of things that I did at Nike was I created a category called outdoor basketball that didn't exist before. And that was really interesting. If you're a basketball fan, you may remember that in 1998, there was a big NBA lockout, and it was the first time that the game became highly politicized, and a lot of people found a real distaste with basketball, and they were moving away from it. So all of a sudden they weren't wearing their Lakers and their Bulls jerseys anymore to play on outdoor courts, but they were taking army t-shirts and cutting off the sleeves and army fatigues, and this whole kind of street ball movement started to happen, and it was very anti-NBA. And nobody was doing a range of clothing for them that was technical and performance oriented. So we put together a proposal and had to pitch it to all the VPs at Nike. It's a very political and matrix driven organization.
I'm sure that is. That's right.
Oh, definitely.
From the top down.
Definitely. And anything fashiony is like, fashion was the F word at Nike, you
Mm,
know, it was all about performance. And I had to reassure all my stakeholders that it was absolutely performance gear, but it was for you know, hardcore basketball lovers that just did not want to wear NBA jerseys. And we got that across the line. And in the first 6 months, it drove $60 million in sales
that's
globally.
incredible. That is
Yeah, it was,
absolutely incredible. I mean,
yeah.
it's
So it was
interesting, the idea of, you were within a corporate structure, but you were very entrepreneurial within that structure. So I guess it's more of a intrapreneur than an entrepreneur.
definitely, definitely. And Nike does give people those opportunities. I mean, the just do it philosophy really
Hmm.
does fuel the culture of the business. It's very much, you know, don't ask for permission, but ask for forgiveness later. Um,
Absolutely.
and but you know, getting certain things across the line, you really needed to know how to work the matrix and how to bring in sponsors and different people who would support your initiatives to make them happen. So if you lacked those skills, it was hard to get things across the line. But when you knew how to work the system, you could make some amazing things happen. So that was one of the first big things that I did at Nike. That was kind of a bit of a career builder for me. And then the last thing that I did at Nike that was really quite notable was launching, at the time it was called White Label, Nike White Label, and it was kind of the fusion of fashion and sport. So that was another insight that I gained. I was working with a lot of strategic accounts across Europe, working out of the Amsterdam European headquarters. And we kept hearing from the really cool stores like Colette in Paris or Barney's in New York, both of whom no longer exist, by the way, which is really sad. But you know, we were hearing from these really cool retailers, and they were saying, we really want Nike product, and our customers want it, but they don't want the same stuff that's in Foot Locker. So
Yeah.
there was a real opportunity to actually take Nike to the fashion distribution, but take performance gear to them. So it was not about creating Nike fashion clothes, but it was creating an exclusive range of very cool colorways and very cool styles, but still highly functional and highly performance based. And that was the birth of a new category. And it started off being called, it had about 3 different names in before we launched it. It was Nike Fusion, then it was Nike White Label, and now it's known as NSW at Nike. And I'm told by my friends who are still at Nike, and I have many of them who are there as VPs, that it is now a multi-billion-dollar category.
That's
So
absolutely incredible. That is
yeah, and I'm,
absolutely
you know, maybe
incredible.
if I hadn't done it, maybe somebody else would have. But I guess, yeah,
We can never assume that. We can
I don't
never
know.
assume
I
that.
thought they may
This
have gotten into it anyway, but yeah, it was an amazing opportunity. I loved it. I had a ball launching that, and it was, you know, all about, you know, a completely different business unit and launching a business unit with a different model and a different go to market.
right,
So that was a
right.
lot of fun. Yeah,
That
and then
that's
after that,
amazing. Let me touch let me before we get off the Nike, because I think you're transitioning into kind of the next phase. But
yeah,
I when you were kind of unpacking the whole Nike story, it took me back to when I was in high school, which was, I think, a century ago. But I my very first job when I was in high school was working at a shoe store, and it was in a small Midwestern town in the States. And I remember in 1980 when Nike came to this town, and it was so revolutionary and so unique and so different. I mean, it replaced all the kids wore the Converse Chuck Taylors. That's all they had was Chuck Taylors. That was these basketball teams all wore the Converse, but when Nike landed, it was a revolution. It was amazing, just the impact that it had on fashion globally. I mean, just out of the
definitely.
box, out of the box. So
Yeah,
it was crazy times.
definitely. They created you know, a whole I guess culture of and a, you know, macro trend around wearing sportswear as as leisure wear, as work wear even now.
Yeah. Yeah.
People wear Nike trainers to the office,
Oh,
and
it is. It is. I mean, we've gotten way past business casual. It's now, it's like athletic wear. But please go carry on with your story, because I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to touch on that memory, trip down memory lane for me.
no, no, and that's beautiful. I love that. And everybody has those, has those stories when they first came across, something. But yeah, it was a real wow moment with Nike, and when they discovered it. Except for the diehard Adidas fans, they'll tell you about their Adidas
Exactly.
moment. um, so yeah, so after Nike, so I'd been there for 10 years, and I was headhunted by Levi's, and it was a very, very hard decision to leave Nike because I loved my job, and I loved what I was doing. But I'm also the sort of person who I want to challenge myself and keep
Hmm.
growing and doing new things. And Levi's asked me to become the global brand director for their premium category. So premium was the real top of the pyramid category for them. It was, they had two collections, Levi's Red and Levi's Vintage Clothing. And then Levi's Red was a collection that was all about new blueprints of denim. And Levi's were the inventors of the denim
Yeah,
category. So it
for
was about
sure.
maintaining their position. Also was given the responsibility for the women's category as well. And another big lesson that I learned working for Levi's, you can take your eye off the ball and very quickly lose a lot of your business. So Levi's was very different to Nike. Nike has always been a customer first, whereas when I got to Levi's, what I found was a completely different culture. And it was almost, so they had their own manufacturing. They were just getting out of manufacturing as I joined, but it was one of those businesses where the tail wagged the dog. So they had this incredible, I call it the sausage machine. They had these factories that were all geared up to deliver 501s. And there was a time that men, women, and children all wore 501s.
Yep.
And suddenly something changed. All of a sudden, bootylicious, sexy denim started coming out from all of these niche brands, and you had the Beyoncés and the Britneys, all wearing these, these sexy, low, hipster jeans, and Levi's completely missed it. They thought they were going to keep selling 501s to women forever, and overnight they lost a huge chunk of their consumption. There was a saying called "pink it and shrink it," and
I
you
love
take
it.
the men, yeah, you take the men's blue shoe or blue fleece hoodie, and you do a pink and smaller version for women. And Nike had learned that lesson quite early, that is not an acceptable approach. You won't grow your business and you won't connect with a female consumer unless she feels she's being served in a very direct way and you're establishing a real dialogue with her. So I was able to take those learnings from Nike and apply them at Levi's.
But it certainly
Yeah.
probably made you more comprehensive, even in your own skill set. I mean, you saw such a, kind of a diversity of, approaches, corporate approaches, and that, I mean, that's as we kind of transition into today, I mean, if you look back at Nike, look back at Levi's and other positions that you might have held in that interim period, but how has that kind of formed your consultancy today, and what are, some of the key takeaways that you really, have built the foundation for your business today?
So our philosophy is that when you're delivering strategy, you're putting any type of strategy together, whether it's your big strategic plan, your roadmap for the next 3 years, or just delivering one small project, you need to have a broader stakeholder framework. So you've identified what the project deliverable is,
Mhm.
and the next step right after that is to say, well, how does this project impact and create benefit for these 6 stakeholder groups? So we have a framework that's around 6 stakeholders. First of all, customer. Second, employees. And this isn't in order, but
Mhm.
customer is obviously the most important. Employees is shareholders, the community, the environment, and suppliers. So there are a whole bunch of stakeholders that are really dependent on how you go about things to also have success outcomes. So it's about considering all of those, and they believe in what we're doing, and we're doing good for all of them whilst making money at all costs. If there's no financial viability, there is no business.
Right.
But can we make money and do really well, and at
Mhm.
the same time, do well or do good by these stakeholders?
But over those times I mean, your vast amount of experience that you've had, and including the consultancy side of things, so it appears that these are almost universals. That some of the things that you talked about, regardless of the size of the company, regardless of the size of the team that you're working with, um, if you were speaking to somebody on a real micro level that was just wanting to start something, what would be two or three real foundational steps that you think you've learned over your time that are just absolutely crucial to launching a startup successfully? What have you found over the different roles that you've had and the different companies you've consulted with? What are two or three really foundational steps?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing is just from a pure strategic, well, there's a couple of things, but from a pure strategic standpoint, um, make sure that it truly is a viable concept that is going to play into the new economy,
Mm,
and look at all of the macro trends that are around you, and think about how the market is going to evolve dramatically. One of the phrases that I always repeat to customers, I heard a great speaker, a gentleman called Scott Farquhar, who's one of the co-founders of Atlassian, which is Australia's most well-known tech company, and they operate in the US as well.
yeah.
I heard him speak last year, and he said there's only three types of businesses in the world: those that are digital, those that are trying to be digital, and those that will be disrupted by digital. And I think that is mostly true. There will always be a handful of businesses that are very manual and very crafty and very all built around craftsmanship, and that will never go away. But there will still be an aspect of their business that will be digital, and I think that is a huge reality that businesses need to be thinking about. How do they tap into an increasingly digitalized economy? And consider the fact that artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the major trends around data are all evolving very, very quickly. And so the way business will look in 3 to 5 years' time is going to change dramatically. So think about the longevity of your business and how it will play into all of these macro trends. So that would be the first thing. The second thing would be purpose. We're really, really big believers in purpose. And I think life is too short to be working in something you don't believe in. So if you're going to start a business, don't do it opportunistically because you think, hey, the world needs face masks right now because of coronavirus. I'm going to jump on that. Make sure that it's something that you're absolutely passionate about. I'm not saying people shouldn't be entrepreneurial and shouldn't jump on opportunities, but if you're going to be investing in starting a new business that you want to have
Yeah.
as a source of revenue, think about what's the biggest societal impact that you want to have as an individual. Is there an alignment between the business purpose and your personal purpose as an
That's good.
individual? Make sure you know your individual purpose first, and then build your business around that. So
I
that's
mean,
the
yeah.
second. Uh, yeah, and the third is really about the relationship piece and the stakeholder piece, understanding there's a bigger group of stakeholders. And if you're going to start a business, from the very outset, you need to be thinking about, well, who will my stakeholders be? Who will my customers be? Who will my shareholders be? Thinking through all of that up front, I think, is also critical, because stakeholder capitalism and conscious capitalism, whatever you want to call it, is set to grow. it will absolutely be the way that we do business. I mean, we talk about it with our clients. We say, the last decade was about digital transformation, and this decade will be about, digital will only keep growing,
Right.
but it'll be about the stakeholder capitalism, and it'll be about purpose-led transformation. So yeah, they would be the three key things.
You were actually on the cutting edge if you had like jobs that were in the kind of the social responsibility genre, a number of years ago. I mean that was that was predating when it was really kind of in vogue, for companies to have those roles. So yeah, whoever you worked for at the time was certainly, was pretty visionary.
My boss said to me, fine, on top of your day job, you're also going to be chair of our CSR council, work it out. And I was like, okay, sure. So I had to self-educate really to understand, well, how do you do that? And actually that it was one of the coolest things ever to work out what should our community impact territory be. And I kind of developed the model myself using, what I'd learned out in the market, and I
Right.
looked at who was
Right.
doing a great job. And my philosophy now around that, a lot of businesses are like, oh, we want to do breast cancer because my sister-in-law had it, or we want to do such and such an initiative because it's something that I'm involved in. I love animals, so I want to do RSPCA. And the model that we developed was, no, you've got to talk to your customers and your employees and find out what they're passionate about, and
That's
then
good.
you also need to understand what makes sense for the business and where can you
Right.
have impact. So, for example, at Jurlique, we were a women's cosmetics business, and we actually just caught a round of brand health check that we were about to do, a whole bunch of surveys we were about to send out to customers. So we actually added it to the questionnaire and said, of all of these different types of cause territories, what's important to you? And then we asked our employees as well. And what came back overwhelmingly was the education and economic empowerment of girls and women. That came back as a really big one that everyone was really interested in. And then we thought, well, does that make sense for our business? Well, yeah, we're in the business of
Perfectly. Yeah.
serving women. So that all of these
Yeah.
overlaps came back, and that's when yep, that's the box that we're going to tick. So we said this will be our territory. And I think it's really important for businesses to work out what is their cause territory. And they may have many, very, very large businesses will have to have many cause territories. But if you're a small business and you're just starting up, my recommendation is find one territory to work with that is really relevant to your business, to what you do day to day, to your customer, to your employees, and start there.
You have an uncanny knack of taking apparently disparate things and seeing what the connection is to, to the whole. And as you've kind of woven your story today, I mean, every facet of your story is somehow connected to the next piece, and connected to the next piece, and then connected to the roles that you had, connected to the vision you have for your consultancy, and the kind of the ethos and the goal and the why behind what you do. And I have just I've thoroughly enjoyed just hearing you kind of unpack that. And it's almost like a spectator as you walk through your timeline, the of all the experiences you've had, and just how it has really formed you into who you are today, and formed your company into who it is today. And I just want to once again just thank you for taking the time today just to unpack that, and to speak into the lives of those that listen to Rising Tide Startups, and at various levels. And even regardless of whether starting something or not, I mean, even from a personal standpoint, how can you kind of reframe your life? How can you reframe your career? How can you reframe how you look at, the issues that are impacting us today? But I just want to once again, Rosanna, thank you so much for taking the time today, and just really playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Thanks again for joining us.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and anything I can do, yeah, to help your community and spread the word, I'm very, very happy to participate. So thank you so much for having me.